Okay. So again, this is Ann Columbus. She's with Jefferson County DSS, and she has DSS Transitional and DSS Chronic Homeless 1 projects. So Tara, I'm going to let you take it away, and I'm going to.
Hi, and bear with me 1 second. My computer's running real slow as I pull these up.
Oh, I'm fine, thank you. While you're doing that, let me say, if I can be so bold.
Absolutely.
These are pretty much the same programs. Everything's written the same supports. The only difference is the smaller chronic homeless, all the people in that are chronically homeless. But everything else about them is the same. I write the grants the same. We provide the same services and supports, use the same staff and things like that. So even though it's two separate, I can address some of them, but when we get to looking at some of the stats and stuff, but basically we're talking about the same program when I answer questions about them.
Okay, perfect. And you'll just delineate any difference when and if there is any.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Beautiful. Okay. So in just reviewing your application, I did have a couple of questions. Sorry. Could you expand on how your agency is resources and experience are meeting the needs of clients facing different cultural barriers?
Well, and I think some of these answers are going to overlap, so I apologize if I repeat myself. It's kind of unusual for a DSS to have a grant of this nature. It's very different than our traditional programs. But having said that, we're still a unit of local government. We have all of the criteria and requirements on us in this program that we do for our staff in any program. So there's never any discrimination or shouldn't be any difference in how we approach someone culturally, of course. Our COC is fairly rural. Are you with Franklin, Essex, Tara?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, so you get that then, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
So when you start looking at percentages or ways that you can really be inclusive and support people, sometimes it's hard to find those. We have things like a language line where we can call and have someone translate for us when we're dealing with someone who maybe English is not their first language. So we have those types of supports that are kind of built in as being part of a government agency. But as far as, being cognizant of cultural differences, that really comes down to the care managers that we're working with and kind of getting to know the households and maybe them educating us on what those differences might be. We have a woman in our transitional program who is a military wife from Russia, and she came here because she married her husband overseas. They had some DV here. Things didn't work out. So she's here in Jefferson County without a lot of supports and kind of stuck. No social security number, all that stuff, we're trying to work through the government and everything. But just kind of, we were talking yesterday about her approach to how she's raising her children and kind of allowing them to be independent. And it's so unusual that you would see like a 8-year-old walking 2 blocks to school, but he does that and she feels good about that and she wants him to do that, and she uses our public transport. A lot of our households just, they don't want to use the bus. They don't understand how to do that. So we talked to her about maybe working with some of our younger households, the under 24 people, to kind of show them, get them more comfortable with that. But I don't know if that's really the kind of cultural thing that you're talking about, but that's kind of what I see in the work that we're doing with people. Until we really get to know them, we don't really have much of an opportunity to address any cultural differences, but sometimes we learn something.
No, absolutely. That was exactly what I was looking for. Thank you. specifically the questions regarding how your program's adapting to COVID. I was wondering if you could also expand on those. COVID service delivery, partnering with existing providers in COVID outreach, strengthening confidence in the vaccine, things like that.
Yep. I had this last year during COVID, because again, we're a DSS.
Mhm.
We didn't close. We limited and, you know, changed how we did our activities, but it gave us a great opportunity because a lot of the interns, the MSW interns that were in, you know, working remotely in schools, couldn't go through with their placement.
Mhm.
So we ended up being approached by some of the colleges and we were able to work some things out. So I had 3 or 4 MSW interns on staff last year, and we used them to do what we call like a COVID wellness assessment. So they were reaching out to the people in our program, spending about 45 minutes on the phone with them, just kind of having a conversation. And we used it, HUD had a reference tool that you could kind of use to, you know, how are you managing your stress? How are you feeling about this or that? You know, we'd ask if they were vaccinated. And if they weren't, or either way, if they were, like how they were feeling about that. And if they weren't, you know, if they were interested in getting more information, or we keep it very, try not to be too intrusive and be respectful of, you know, what they're saying to us, even if sometimes it's kind of crazy, you know, like it just doesn't make sense. But we found that, you know, that we could have someone that could reach out, kind of a best case practice kind of thing, reach out to people and spend some time talking to them, where, you know, our care managers are so overloaded with the caseloads that they have. They're really only ever reaching out to tell you, you know, you've done something wrong, or we need to complete this, and, you know, I want you to do that. It's not really a conversation where they can talk. And a lot of people are just lonely, right?
Absolutely.
So that was fantastic for our MSW candidates to have the opportunity and to get that kind of experience. It was good for our clients, and we're continuing that with some more some more interns this year, but also with, you know, kind of trying to incorporate it more with our staff that we have here to, you know, to try to do that. Whether it's, you know, a COVID wellness assessment or just a general wellness assessment, like, you know, not every appointment or contact we have with someone is about us getting something from them. You know, sometimes it could be a conversation about what's going on in their life and how they're feeling about things. So,
No,
yeah.
perfect. That was what I was looking for. I appreciate it. So those are the only questions I had that weren't the 4 interview questions that we sent you. So moving on to those, would you please describe the support services your project is tailored to serve persons coming from an unsheltered situation?
Again, I think it's a great model to have this through a DSS. Sometimes it's frustrating because, you know, the traditional financial services programs are driven by regulations that are so different from like housing first type principles that we have in these COC funded projects. But the fact that our agency is kind of respectful of this program as being kind of different. And, you know, trying to work with us. And in the end, you know, it's easier for them if we can keep the clients stable and they're not coming into our homeless program at DSS, and their cases aren't closing and then reopening and getting sanctioned and all that. So we work pretty closely with anyone who's on temporary assistance. And usually those that are coming in from emergency housing are somewhere in that process. So to make sure their food stamp benefits are maintained and things like that, we have a release and we have access to that case information, and we kind of check on their status each month to make sure no one's looks like they're gonna have any trouble, they're coming up for a recertification or anything like that, to just kind of keep that in mind. But additionally, all the supports that DSS has, we kind of have access to as well. So employment and training supports, we can kind of connect them with that. The source specialist, we have a source specialist at DSS. That's a different grant program that I have, but
Mhm.
you know, they work pretty closely with a number of our Shelter Plus Care clients that we think are appropriate for Social Security and would be homeless but for this program. Education assistance when it's available, depending on, you know, their situation, transportation assistance, employment activities. Department of Employment and Training works out of here with our, you know, our TA people. And a number of our, I think we have a pretty good mix of mostly temporary assistance and Social Security or SSI population. We do have some that have income, and the unemployment income, you know, was something to kind of adjust. Some of our people, it meant they were no longer eligible for temporary assistance,
Mhm.
even when they didn't count that additional like 300 or 600, whatever it was, they still, you know, they weren't eligible for that. So kind of working with them through that. I just think being based out of here, and I'm guessing that in most of the other programs, their population would be similar, TA, Social Security, maybe, you know, scattered with some employments. But I think it's much easier for me to work with DSS kind of being embedded here and liaisoning, I don't know what the right term is there, but serving kind of as a liaison between the supported housing program and the temporary assistance program. Sometimes they're a little like, you know, you're enabling them, you're, you know, being too lenient, or you're, you know, but housing first, like I say, it's very different. And you're taking people that have, you know, a lifetime in many cases of,
Mhm.
you know, choices and trauma and things that have happened. And I have an opinion about what our DSS paperwork and program stuff is like, and it's hard for me to follow it sometimes, right? So
I'm
you
a
know,
lawyer, and I've said that to people. Like, I struggle to fill this thing out.
yeah.
Yeah.
Or you get a notice, and I mean, like, what we were just kind of talking about this a couple of weeks ago, because I have some new staff too. Like, what really? There's 30 pages here. What are the 3 things you need to know from this notice? Case is closing because you're employed. You're going to get transitional assistance for the next 6 months, but then it's going to go to based on your income. You know, like what
Mhm.
did I really need to know from this? You know, just kind of figuring those things out. So I think it's a great benefit to be located here, for DSS to have the grant, and that they see the benefit of it a lot of ways because I make them see the benefit. But you know, we can see when my spending is down in Shelter Plus Care because I haven't added people or whatever, my emergency housing at DSS is way up. So I can kind of relate those, and you know, they appreciate that we can work with that population.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much. Um, does your agency have someone with lived experience of homelessness within its executive leadership who's involved in programmatic and funding decisions? And again, that might be weird since you're DSS, but yeah, I gotta ask. It's on the
And you know, I did the ranking review for the Franklin Essex stuff. And you know, I was thinking, like, how am I going to answer that? Like, I could try to make that connection between like boards and different things, but ultimately, you know, some of us I struggled in my youth with housing, but you know, 40 years ago. So I don't think it's really the same. And you know, even then, it was never to the point that the households we're working with have. We have some
right.
staff here, but certainly I can't answer yes to that question. I don't know if it's say unfortunately or fortunately, but we are
I
sensitive to what these households are dealing with. That's about the best we can do.
So with question number 3, the COC scores each program's impact on system performance measures in part 1 of the rank and review tool. If you felt your project performed low on any section of part 1 due to serving particularly vulnerable populations or households with severe needs, would you please explain?
I think it always comes down to the income, you know, the ability to improve your income over time. These are really difficult populations to work with. Many of them are appropriate for Social Security. That's not a quick process. So we do look at moving on and how we can possibly make someone stable. I think it looks better in the chronic program because it's so much smaller, and so many of those people tend to be Social Security eligible, and we can get it relatively quickly for them. So I think there's, you know, you see a little bit better there. The other thing, and this isn't really related to the work we're doing with people, but doing better capturing that data. Sometimes, like, our HIMSS starts with our emergency housing, and then as we take people out of there and move them into shelter plus care, like, we transfer all that information over. They tend to, when someone presents, they don't have income yet, they don't have SNAP, maybe they have oftentimes they may have Medicaid, but the intake workers, because they know they're going to give it to them, they mark that they have it.
Oh,
You know what I mean? Because, like, by the time you leave today, you're going to leave with that, or at least, you know, that process started. So just kind of being a little bit more cognizant of what someone is presenting with initially and kind of capturing that versus saying, well, we're going to give them emergency food stamps, so they're getting that. We're going to, just so we can kind of show the work that we're doing or show what situation people are in when they're coming to us. And then it's a little confusing to do some of the awards updates with the annual reassessments. They don't always fall in line. We weren't always capturing, Social Security gets that automatic update every year. We weren't always capturing that in our annual reassessment when we were putting it in the computer. We were in our paper file, but not in our award. So just kind of tweaking some of those things, so every little bit that we can get, but ultimately that's a really hard measure for us to meet when you're having to take off of coordinated entry with the highest score, with the most barriers, with the, you know, sex offenders and criminal justice involved and all those things that give you those barriers. It's really difficult to get income and increase income for that population.
And actually, that's a really interesting thing that you just pointed out with I get the pragmatic side, right? They're just like, well, we're going to give it to them by the end of the day, so I'll just mark it. And that, you know, those people not understanding why the reports are so important. It makes sense.
Yeah.
So question 4, are those in your project racially representative of those in your COC's homeless population?
I don't know.
Okay.
I looked at the reports, and I mean, it's all within range, but I would say our population is so, it's hard to see that diversity. So 1 or 2 people in a program make a tremendous impact when you're talking about the numbers we're talking about in our programs and even in general in our community. There's a couple of things that, like, I didn't understand for sure. I thought there was one where, yeah. Or Hawaiian or Native American was 2.
Ooh, wait, I'm sorry. The audio just got really weird for me.
I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
It sounds like you went far, far away.
Yeah.
Sorry, is it better?
No, actually, it sounds almost like you're on a headphone or something instead of a speakerphone like you were before. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm in it, like, my camera has the speaker. It's not great. Can you hear me any better now?
Not really. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's, I don't usually use it. I didn't have a call-in number.
There you go. Perfect.
There we go.
Okay.
Yep. Perfect. So I'm sorry if you could start over a little bit.
So I was looking at, like, in general, I think it's reflective of what's in our community, but it's really hard to see that diversity because we just don't have it. So one or two people make a big impact, but like just kind of looking at the transitional Native American, Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, whatever that thing was.
Mhm.
Wait, no. I'm sorry, 2 or more races. I can't even read the thing. It said that there were 2 in the COC, but 10 in our program. So some of those, I think, again, comes to a data thing, and that would be probably on us, something not quite being right. But I think overall, there tends to be, of course, a higher representation of people of color in homeless programs in general than in our community. I don't necessarily see that when I look at the numbers, but I do know it to be true.
Mhm.
So I don't know how we would change that other than
Mhm.
maybe trying to be cognizant of getting good data and then being able to maybe see how we wanted to address that through coordinated entry or some of those systems. Because I'm not going to be able to change the criminal justice program and things like that. And so many of our people that are coming in with
Right.
barriers are coming from that population. But how we approach it and maybe how we can improve our ability to get those numbers more in line with where they should be.
Perfect. So that's all the questions that I have. So I'll turn it over to you. Do you have any questions for me or Samantha?
I don't think so. I'm pretty, familiar with the process. I'm fortunate. I was glad, Sam, to hear that you said there's new projects that are being, put in for this year. So I would much rather have a new provider putting beds in than expand one of my programs by 5 beds. So that sounds fantastic to me.
Good.
And I'm really glad we can just kind of keep this going along.
Yeah, I was very impressed this year. Actually, all COCs that I'm lead of put in new projects, and many of them had new projects from new agencies. So yeah, that was a very a nice thing to see, and hopefully we can keep that up.
Well, I'm always going to try to expand these programs when the money's available, just in case, because, I don't want to leave it sitting there if no one's going to put in a new project. But, that to me, that's preferred to get more up and running and going.
Yes, I agree. Okay, so
Right.
if nothing else, Anne, I appreciate your time and thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have
It's
a good
nice
I
day.
hope those that have to view this later enjoy it. Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye. All right. So anything you wanted to discuss for DSS?
So I have so for the interview questions, full points for everything other than question 2 because they didn't have that.
Yeah.
She answered all of my questions I had on the scorecard, so I am going to go back and likely rescore some of those.
Yep.
And again, I'll have those to you by the end of the day.
Perfect.
That's it.
Okay, thank you very much. I really appreciate that you took the time to do this your first year. I'm glad that you're willing to do it again because
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm going to be reaching out, so that's great. So yeah, if you can just finalize all your scores and then let me know when your scores are so that I can go in and do my part.
Perfect. Will do.
All right, thank you so much, Tara, and you have a great day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.